Hi everyone, welcome back to our underpainting. We are currently in the process of completing our underpainting, and up until this point we started a drawing, transferred it to canvas, did a raw umber wipe away. Once that dried, we introduced underpainting white, and with the addition of raw umber and underpainting white, we further enhanced the three value families, light, darks, and midtones. And then once that dried, we find ourselves here in this step in the process, the further refinement of the underpainting. And one of the things that is significantly different today is that we are adding ultramarine blue. The reason we're doing that is we are in the interest of enhancing our value families. With the addition of ultramarine blue, we can actually get a darkest dark or a 1 on the value scale. So we're broadening the range, refining. And as the painting proceeds from here, we will simply continue to refine the push of darks and the pulling of lights until we find a harmonious balance, and the painting essentially looks like a completed painting with the exception of color. So from left to right, I have underpainting white, and if you recall, I squeezed my underpainting white out in worms so that I don't contaminate my color. I can draw a clean brush or a clean palette knife several times and reduce the risk of contamination. Raw umber and ultramarine blue. I'm also using liquid again. I will use liquid in every single painting session from here on. Put a little in my palette cup and I'm good to go. So, I'm using a small brush today, synthetics. Synthetics are softer haired brushes than the coarser or harder hairs of hog hair. So, I dip my brush in a little liquid and I make a little pool. And you can see how thin that is. Remember, the thinner you paint, the more control you have. The thicker you paint, the less control you have. So I start thin and I slowly and gradually get thicker consistency or thicker viscosity of my paint. So I'm still working with a dark, light, and a midtone. I just want to show you again, just to remind you of how thin I am painting. And you can see, I'll get close up in on that. You can see how thin that is, really. That's fairly thin. You can see the palette underneath. And the same will go for my ultramarine blue. And so one thing to remember is that when you return to the studio to a dry painting, it's good to sit down and look. Sit down, have a look, and go over your strategy and your plan in your head. Again, dipping my brush in clean liquid. That brush was a little contaminated. Clean liquid. I just want to show you how thin I'm using this. A little ultramarine blue. Very, very thin. Okay, you get the idea. So remember, when you return to your painting, a dry painting in the studio, have a seat, take a breath, relax, look, and think. Part of my job is to help you look and think and rewire your brain to look and think like an artist. And so I like to keep a set of strategies. And so the strategy I always return to when I return to the studio to a dry painting is I start with the darks. And I sort of warm up by doing some visual exercises that not only exercise my eyeballs, but exercise the right side of my brain. I call them brain commands, and I mentioned them in class before, but I'll remind you again. So before I even paint, I look at my motif, and I squint my eyes, and I command my brain to just, through squinting, recognize the abstract puzzle shapes of dark, the darkest darks. It should take about 2 minutes looking through squinted, blurred eyes, and what will happen in a short amount of time is you will begin to see these abstract puzzle shapes of dark almost floating off of the surface. When that's happening, you're actually seeing with your artist's eyeball and your artist's brain. You're seeing abstractly. As soon as you see the darks, then give another brain command and command your brain to see just the light shapes, the abstract puzzle shapes of light. Take 2 minutes and observe the abstract puzzle shapes of light sort of leap off the canvas, almost like they're floating. And again, when they're floating, you have successfully switched over into the right side of your brain, enabling you to see abstractly, which is the ideal operating brain of the artist. The reason we start with the darks and lights is because they are the easiest to see, and it's nice to sort of warm up in a position of confidence. It's the midtones that are the more ambiguous because there's a broader range of midtones. You have light midtones, midtones, and dark midtones, right? So it's really a matter of looking, squinting, and making hard decisions as to where you're going to push and pull those midtones. If something's on the fringe, if a midtone is on the fringe, you're not sure if it's a midtone or a dark midtone, it's up to you as an artist to make a decision to push it one way or another. Maybe you compress it. If your composition needs more darks, then maybe you push it in a darker direction. Remember, we are artists. We are poets, not reporters. So rather than reporting or painting exactly what we're seeing, the job of the artist is to look, assess, and edit, and do whatever we have to do in terms of changing things, making things darker, lighter, warmer, cooler, bigger, smaller, etc. All in the interest of creating a harmonious painting. Okay, take a breath. You've returned to your studio. You have your reference. You've done your visual exercises, your brain commands. And now it's very simple. Start with the darks. That's my mantra. It kind of keeps it simple. So even before I open the studio door, even before I get in my car and drive to the studio, I already know what I am coming to. So just mixing my brush with a little liquid and ultramarine blue, just painting in very thin glazes. Ultramarine blue where I see the darkest darks. Pretty simple. Not using a lot of paint here. This is all about further refinement. I'm taking my time. It's actually a very slow process, and it affords me lots of control. Someone once told me that paintings are just big mistakes that you spend your entire time just trying to fix. And it's in the process of fixing all the mistakes that it actually becomes a painting. And that's kind of true. We're just refining. So even with this dark, you can fix your drawing flaws, straighten out some of this architecture, clean up lines. I feel like that actually gave it a little pop. It's not much. I used very little paint at all. And this is how I like to proceed. Slow and steady wins the race. I really am in no rush, and I really actually enjoy the process of just slowly chipping away. And all I'm really doing now is pulling the darks and pushing the lights. Moving forward with the rest of this painting today, I probably won't use any more ultramarine blue. I just wanted to get those darkest darks in there, and now I will probably work from the dark midtones and slowly weave my way to the lights. But I'll generally go back and forth and do what I have to do in the interest of harmonizing my light, dark, and midtones. So let's see how this goes. And that should do it for our underpainting refinement for today. I'm not saying it's complete and ready for color. I really won't know that until I come to the studio again and look at it with fresh eyes. But the idea with refinement and the addition of ultramarine blue is to get your darkest darks and your whitest whites and your full range of values. You're also refining edges and adding harmony to the three families of dark, light, and midtone. You're essentially getting as close as you can to an underpainting that looks like a finished painting with the absence of color. So there you go.